Table looking at a scenario where this is part one of continents trying to take on the World Series. Now you might be wondering why Belgium is colored in red. Well, because the Democratic Republic of Congo is on the blue team, obviously. So anyways, today we're going to be focusing on Oceania and their conquest, and it's not going to be too much. First, we have a surprise attack on the world. Yeah, let's just say they declared war on the United Nations, even though that's an organization that they were part of as well. But whatever. So they first start by invading the New Guinea part of Indonesia, and eventually start to gather their forces. They start to plumb through it more and more, and they start doing a bit of island hopping. Ever since I've been playing Rise of Nations, I always try to use right click to move my map to move the screen, and it never works. We see the capturing of this weird starfish-looking island, and East Timor being wiped out, being the first country to fall to Oceania. We'll then have Indonesia being swept upon as Australian troops land over in the main island. Eventually, we see half of Malaysia and Brunei getting rolled over, and a failed attempt to invade the Philippines. Singapore is captured after a brutal defense, and as well as Malaysia, and Myanmar and Thailand, or Burma, is starting to be pushed up into. They first capture the capital of Burma and Thailand, because these countries are very unstable. And we see the invasion in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam as being threatened until they're wiped out. They also capture Hayden, which is an island off the coast of China, and Hong Kong and Macau are swept over. A failed invasion into Taiwan happens, although a successful one into the Philippines goes in as they're basically under a dictatorship. We have Australia landing in Sri Lanka and even being able to land in southern India, as well as Madagascar. We see the push into Madagascar, and it eventually wipes out the country. We see a brutal defense as Oceania. Can Norton leave me alone? As Oceania blitzkriegs through this part of Africa to cut off the south. This did drain a lot of resources, though. Although because Africa is quite poor, they're able to start pushing up. Over in Europe, we have the blue team deciding to step down onto Belgium, as once again it's on the red team because reasons you don't want to know if you don't know. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we see the invasion of Belgium, and it goes very well, and the country is wiped out. Back over in Africa, after a long stalemate, we have some resupplyment, and Australia is able to penetrate the areas once again. After they start threatening Equatorial Guinea, American troops and UN troops, I should say, finally start to arrive in the continent. We see them mainly going in through Nigeria and liberating the Congo and some other surrounding countries. The Democratic Republic of Congo is a bit of a rocky ground, as although it does have people and its own races and languages, it doesn't have a country. So yeah. Once again, stealing jokes from alternate history. Ha 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 ha. We see the push into Tanzania. That's somewhat reminiscent to the Germans for absolutely no reason at all. And we see Kenya and Somalia being liberated. The invasion in northern Madagascar fails completely, although we do see a continuing blue team push down into Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo is completely liberated, as well as the Chad countries, which is basically just southern Africa. Eventually, after about 50% of it is taken, they're able to successfully make an invasion into Madagascar, and it's wiped out and liberated. Eventually, all of Africa has been recaptured by the blue team, and now it's time to focus on Asia. The Oceania realizes what's going on, so they launch a spring offensive, mainly pushing into India and populated areas of China, even landing some troops in Taiwan. We also see a naval invasion of Madagascar, and they get almost all of it, but it stays in a stalemate. The blue team, mainly gathering manpower from China and the USA, pushes down and is able to re-liberate India and Sri Lanka. Chinese areas are retaken, as well as parts of Taiwan, and Southeast Asia is mostly under the control of the blue team. Eventually, we do see Oceania getting a little bit of a foothold in the harsh jungle areas, although it doesn't last for long as they start to be pushed back. We see a combination of India, British, Chinese, and Nepalese troops holding the harsh jungle line of Burma, and the pushdown and re-liberation of northern Vietnam and Laos. Eventually, Southeast Asia is recaptured, and Japanese troops invade into the Philippines. USA and the Japanese team up to do some island hopping over the smaller islands that aren't even represented here in this as well. We see a two-pronged offensive, one going one going into one going into the red team's actual territory, and the other going into their occupied lands. Um, we see once again we see the obviously American and Japanese invasions, but we also see invasions into the much bigger islands and parts of Papua New Guinea. We see New Zealand being threatened, although it is very hard to invade as it is one of the bigger countries, and eventually we get a bit of a stalemate. R- Troops from Ukraine and other parts of Europe start to arrive, and Papua New Guinea starts to be rolled over, and Indonesia is being liberated. Eventually, we see the invasion, and this part is, and New Guinea is completely taken by the blue team, and the push down into the Pacific parts of Asia are commencing. The red team now has no ground except for Madagascar, which will be ending soon. We see a bit of a circular like movement with naval invasions across the country until all the Australian troops are killed or surrendered. The Japanese, mainly Japanese and Mongolian bombers, go over to Australia, which clears the pathway for the rest of the UN. Don't ask why I'm doing these all specifically. Just don't, because I don't know either. We see the river areas of Australia, which is actually quite a bit being captured, although most of them are barely active, but whatever. After Northern Australia and Northern New Zealand are completely taken, we have Oceania considering surrendering. Although Australia has one trick up its sleeve, and that is emus and spiders. This does get some solid pushback, but just kidding. This is a realistic video, kind of, and we see Australia being pushed back. The harsh outback. The Australian troops are no are a bit more accustomed to the harsh outback areas, so they're able to get regaining ground there. We see a liberation of most of New Zealand, but the blue team takes the less troops in the outback to cut them off. We see the encirclement around the coastal areas and the capturing of the outback. The capital is being threatened, and New Zealand is recaptured, as well as Tasmania. The capital is circled in on until it eventually falls. And I don't feel like joining a peace deal. Most islands are puppeted by either Japanese or Americans. Japanese or American, Japan or America. Whilst Indonesia gets this. Australia and New Zealand and all the much bigger countries in Oceania, which is like two, are even are puppeted by Western powers. So yeah, there's the first continent on to Africa.